right? So, very good evening, everyone, and warm welcome on behalf of Organized Nutrition. Today, we have decided to make a very interesting topic, and this topic is not being so much discussed in the nutritionist forum. So, all of you are the smart and dietitian nutritionists. Uh, Anana, can you check somebody is on unmute? So, it is a lot of disturbance. Yes. So, a
Yes,
warm
I'm
welcome.
just checking here.
Yes,
Sorry for
just
the
somebody
yes.
is on. So, very good evening, and once again, warm welcome. And I am really privileged to have Dr. Rita Bhattacharya, ma'am, who is more than like 30 years of experience in the field of nutrition. And I have requested ma'am to describe the topic very simply in a very simple way so that you people can understand that what is the relation between this nutrition and this antacids, or people are taking antacids, PPIs or H2 blocker like anything without any medical prescriptions. They are taking over the counter. थोड़ा सा acidity हो गया, so they are taking Gelucils or pantoprazole or ranitidine. So these all drugs are different compositions and they have the different functions. Irrespective of that, people are taking like these are our favorite toffees. We are just taking it. So I am requesting Ananya to just introduce ma'am, and then we will start our discussion. There is something in front of the screen that needs.
Yeah. Good evening, all, and very good evening, ma'am. We are really privileged to have you with us in today's session. I really hope that we will enjoy today's session. So, as already said, Dr. Bhattacharya, Dr. Rita Bhattacharya is basically from West Bengal, but she has spent a major part of her life in Varanasi. And she is having MD in Community Medicine from the Institute of Medical Sciences, BHU, that is Banaras Hindu University. And I guess we don't need any introduction of BHU. We are all familiar with the name. So she's having more than 30 years of experience in the field of medicine. And also she was associated as a medical practitioner with BHU for quite a long time. So she's having a vast experience in this field, as you can understand. And not only as a doctor, I would say she's also a very humble human being, a very nice person with a very beautiful smile on her face always. So we are really like looking forward to today's session, and I request all of you to cooperate with us. Please be on mute till the session is going on, because we will have a Q&A session in the last, as already told. So we wish you will cooperate with us. So let us begin with the session. I will be sharing the screen and the PPT for you, ma'am. And before that, if you want to say something, you can surely say.
Okay, so good evening, Dr. Rita Bhattacharya. I have been working as a Chief Medical Officer in Banaras Hindu University, or I am comfortable both in Hindi and English and in Bengali. तो अगर आपको कोई दिक्कत हो, समझ में न आए, तो आप बताएं, तो हम उस हिसाब से हिंदी या इंग्लिश में शिफ्ट करेंगे. I'm more comfortable in Hindi and English. Okay. So the topic that has been given to me, that will come later on. But before that, I would like to say a few words about the gastrointestinal tract, right? To understand any drug, any topic, we have to go down to a little bit of basics. Of course, I guess being nutritionists, you all know about the gastrointestinal tract. But what happens is that food, after it is masticated in our mouth, it moves from the esophagus into the stomach, as you all know, through a small muscular sphincter, which is known as the lower esophageal sphincter. This sphincter is extremely important because it allows the food to go from the stomach from the esophagus into the stomach, and does not let the food go from the stomach into the esophagus. In the stomach, an acid which is known as the hydrochloric acid is produced, and this combines with the food to break down the food into very small particles so that it can react with the enzymes that are present in the gastric tract. So this is all about the acids. What happens is sometimes there is more acid production, and that is the time when we have a lot of diseases, a lot of problems, very simple problems, which can really be debilitating sometimes. So with this little bit of introduction, we shall continue to our topic of today. Can we have the topic, please? Okay, so today's topic, anything, Shomindu, anything you need to say?
I am requesting to change the slide. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So as I already told you, our stomach has got acids, and this acid is extremely important because it breaks down the food into smaller particles so that the gastric juices and the enzymes can act on the food, and then the food can be absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract. This acid is extremely corrosive, and so it can cause damage to our intestinal mucosa, the gastric mucosa, and therefore the nature has provided such wonderful things. The cells produce a substance which is known as mucin, which produces a gastric acid barrier. So coming to our topic, as the name suggests, it is antacids, which means it is an anti-acid. So anti-acid means it's very simple. It neutralizes the acid which is present in the gastric system. So the acid is then, because it is neutralized, it becomes less. So therefore, what are these antacids? An antacid is any substance which is generally a base or basic salt which neutralizes the stomach acidity. They are used to relieve acid indigestion, upset stomach, sour stomach, and heartburn. Now you will be asking, what is this heartburn? I just now told you of the lower esophageal sphincter. So what happens is there are certain conditions in which the lower esophageal sphincter is damaged, and therefore the acid mixed food, it travels from the stomach into the esophagus. Normally this should not happen. So when the acid travels into the esophagus, there is severe burning inside the chest, and this is what we call as heartburn. Next, please. So the common examples of antacids are calcium carbonate. These are basic salts you people must have all learned in your chemistry classes. So these are used as medicines. So they are calcium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, aluminium hydroxide, magnesium hydroxide, magnesium oxide, and so many other drugs. Yeah, please. So what are the conditions in which there is an excessive acid release? The conditions which cause excessive acid release, because we have to neutralize the acids. So the causes of excessive acid release are, we can go to the previous slide, please. Causes of excessive acid release. Yeah. So these are alcohol consumption, smoking, certain foods. Being nutritionists, you probably know that every individual is different, and different foods cause acidity in different people. Something which might cause acidity in me may not cause in you. So these foods have to be really seen, what foods is causing acidity in that particular person. Also fried foods, particularly the foods which are fried in used oil, these cause severe acidity. Certain drugs like aspirin and the non-steroidal and anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, aceclofenac, Voveran, and all these things. Stress. Stress means any anxiety, depression, sometimes trauma, and burns, or any other diseases, chronic peritonitis, chronic pancreatitis, any stress to the body, any medical stress to the body can cause excessive acid release in the body. And finally, there is the Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Zollinger-Ellison syndrome is a group is a disease where there are the gastric mucosa is lined by small neuro what do you call tumors. These are non-malignant, and they produce a substance which is known as gastrin. So this gastrin substance actually increases the excessive, causes excessive acid release. So that's about the Zollinger and Ellison syndrome. So these are the causes of excessive acid release. Next. So the uses of antacids, as we know, to reduce the acidity in the stomach. It neutralizes the acidity in the acids in the stomach. So it will provide quick relief from heartburn. The acid which has got to the esophagus, so that is immediately neutralized when we have an antacid. It prevents peptic ulcer. So what is this peptic ulcer? These are a group of ulcers which are caused because of erosion of the gastric mucosa. When the gastric mucin barrier is broken, ulcers develop in the alimentary tract. So, and depending upon the place where these ulcers are, they can be esophageal ulcer, they can be gastric ulcer, and they can be the duodenal ulcers. So, antacids prevent, they don't actually prevent peptic ulcers, they prevent the symptoms that are caused due to peptic ulcer. It also provides symptomatic relief from GERD, G-E-R-D, that is gastroesophageal reflux disease. I already told you that the lower esophageal sphincter sometimes get diseased. So the acid from the stomach goes into the esophagus, causing heartburn. This disease is also known as gastroesophageal reflux disease or acid reflux disease. As antacids are important because the relief occurs within 5 to 15 minutes and the duration lasts for approximately 1 to 4 hours. Next, please. So antacids can be broadly grouped into two. One is the systemic antacid and one is the non-systemic antacids. As the name suggests, systemic antacids are those which are absorbed from the system. They provide extremely quick relief from acidity, but they cannot be used for a long time because they contain sodium salts, and this sodium salt is absorbed in the system and it can cause sodium overload. Non-systemic antacids, on the other hand, these are non-absorbable, they are non-soluble in the water, and they are locally acting. They are not, because they are non-soluble, they are not absorbed in the system. And non-systemic antacids are like magnesium hydroxide, magnesium oxide, magnesium trisilicate, aluminium hydroxide, calcium carbonate, and so on. Normally, we don't use only a single type of antacids. Nowadays, systemic antacids like sodium bicarbonate, sodium-bicarb are not used at all. Non-systemic antacids are better, and they also should be used in a combined form. Next, please. Antacid combinations, like I just said, combinations of antacids are frequently used. A single antacid is not satisfactory. So we can have a fast-acting antacid like magnesium hydroxide and a slow-acting antacid like aluminium hydroxide. So they will yield a prompt and a sustained effect. That is why we are combining these antacids. They can, there are salts like magnesium salts, they act as laxatives, and the aluminium salts, they act as, they are constipating agents. So when we combine both these antacids, the bowel movement is least affected. The gastric emptying time, aluminium salts, they delay the gastric emptying time, and magnesium or calcium salts, they tend to hasten it. So therefore, the gastric emptying time is kind of balanced. And the dose of the individual component is also reduced because one antacid is supplementing the effect of the other antacid. So therefore, the dose of individual component is extremely reduced, and therefore the toxicity is minimized. Next, please. Okay, so sometimes these antacids are combined with anti-flatulent drugs. We use anti-flatulents because acidity also causes the hydrochloric acid gas in the body and other gases in the body. So that causes a fullness of the stomach. For that reason, we need to use a antiflatulent like dimethicone or simethicone or polysiloxane. And also sometimes anesthetics are used in the antacids, because like I said, you have heartburn, and so when the acid is traveling into your esophagus or into those ulcers, so what happens is there is severe burning sensation. It's a lot of pain. Only people who have experienced it knows what is the peptic ulcer pain or a hyperacidity pain. So to reduce these pains, and anesthetic agents like oxetizine are added to an antacid to improve the efficacy of the antacids. So the general combinations of the antacids, you all know, but I'll just go through it rapidly. A digene, which is again a combination of aluminium hydroxide, aluminium silicate, methyl polysiloxane. Methyl polysiloxane, as I told you, is an antiflatulent. So digene also prevents, in addition to preventing the symptoms of hyperacidity, it also prevents flatulence, that is fullness of the abdomen. We have digene gel, which is a combination of again magnesium hydroxide, aluminium hydroxide, sodium carboxyl methyl cellulose. This is used to sorbite, as the name suggests, it is a cellulose compound. So when you add it to a liquid, it gives a thick consistency. So that is why we use a sodium carboxymethyl cellulose. This allows the antacid to stay in the stomach for a longer time and creates a coating. So that is why we use this. And also it contains methyl polysiloxane. So that's about digene gel. It is used in the formulation of gel. Gel formulations will always remain in the stomach for a longer time, cause a coating, and help prevent the symptoms of acidity. Next. You also know about Gelusil, which is again aluminium hydroxide and magnesium trisilicate. A word about magnesium trisilicate. This salt trisilicate is not good for the baby. So during pregnancy, it is always advisable to avoid Gelusil, because it can harm the fetus. So that's about Gelusil. That one point I wanted to make over here, which is a combination antacid anyway. It's a very safe antacid otherwise, but in pregnancy we tend to avoid this. Gelusil and gel is again magnesium trisilicate, aluminium hydroxide gel, and this also is a very safe antacid as such. It can be used. It's an over-the-counter drug prescription, but it is better to avoid it during pregnancy because of the trisilicate salt. Tricane, as the name suggests, anything with cane is an antacid. So you have tricane, you have mucane, you have so many canes. So this contains oxetizine, which is an anesthetic agent, and this is particularly helpful in heartburn, in the pains of acidity and in heartburn. It creates the simethicone creates a coating. There is less of bloating sensation, and the pain is reduced because of the oxetizine. That is the anesthetic that has been used. Next, please. So we have the H2 blockers. These are a class of, these are very good drugs, highly effective drugs that reduce the amount of acidity which is produced in the cell lining, in the cells that are present in the lining of the stomach. So antacids are neutralizing the acids that are already present, and H2 blockers are reducing the amount of acid that is produced by the cells of the stomach. That is how they are reducing. So the functions of both are very different, and that is why the uses are also different. These H2 blockers are also known as H2 receptor antagonists. A word about this H2 blockers, which I would want you to remember. H2 there is a chemical in our body which is known as histamine. Histamine causes allergy in the body. Anywhere histamine, it will cause allergy at that part of the body. So when histamine is released in the gastric mucosa, then it produces acidity. These H2 receptors, they are antihistaminic agents. So they reduce they negate the effects of the histamine, and that is why they are also known as H2 receptor antagonists. And since histamine is always released mostly in the evening and in the night. Therefore, H2 receptor antagonists, they are more effective in use during the evening for hyperacidity in the evening or at the night. So some of the common, there are many H2 blockers which are coming out of the market. Every day there's a new H2 blocker which are there in the market. But the common ones that we need to remember and prescribed is cimetidine, ranitidine, famotidine, roxatidine, and so on. Cimetidine is nowadays less prescribed because of the greater side effects and because of the irreversible effects that it causes. Next, please. So I already told you, H2 antagonists are effective in inhibiting nocturnal acid secretions, which depends wholly on histamine. Histamine is produced at night. So obviously, because H2 antagonists, they are preventing the release of histamine. So therefore, H2 antagonists are always preferably given at night. It has modest impact on meal-stimulated acid secretions. That means it does not depend upon food that is ingested. You can take it anytime. It is not necessary to take it empty stomach and so on. So H2 blockers, they thus block 90% of the nocturnal acid and at least 60 to 80% of daytime acid secretion. So these are wonderful group of drugs that we use, and they are very, very safe. Next, please. Adverse drugs, adverse drugs of these of H2 blockers, okay. So the adverse drug reactions are it is very common. Most of the drugs, they cause headaches, dizziness, tiredness, confusion, bowel upset, and long-term use of these drugs can cause rebound acidity, which means although these drugs are used for acidity, because they are used for a very long time, they can cause rebound acidity. These drugs have some effects of androgenic action. That means they increase prolactin. Prolactin is a hormone which is produced in the pituitary, and it is both males and females have a little bit of prolactin in them. The females have more. This is responsible for development of breasts and so on. So it increases the effect of prolactin, and therefore high doses or a very prolonged dose of H2 blockers may cause gynecomastia, loss of libido, impotence, and so on. I already told you cimetidine is now not extremely used because of the more irreversible effects and because the newer drugs are have less side effects and more potent action. Next, please. So the uses of H2 blockers, they are used in peptic ulcer disease. Peptic ulcer is a group of ulcers which can be either in the esophagus when it is known as an esophageal ulcer, in the stomach where it is known as a gastric ulcer, or in the duodenum where it is known as a duodenal ulcer. So it is caused because the gastric gastric and the acid barrier is destroyed. So therefore, these group of drugs, they can be useful in peptic ulcer disease. They are used in stress ulcer prophylaxis. Stress ulcer prophylaxis, stress, anxiety, depressions, and anything. I told you about a line about stress ulcer before. They can stress ulcers can be caused by any kind of medical disease, pancreatitis, peritonitis, and even burns, and any severe disease that can cause stress into the body that can cause acidity. So H2 blockers, we use H2 blockers for prevention of symptoms which are there for stress ulcers. Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, that is again producing gastrin. So therefore, these can prevent, gastrin is increasing the acid secretion. So these H2 blockers are preventing symptoms of Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. They are also used in the GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease or acid reflux. They also can be used for prevention of aspiration pneumonia. We will come to aspiration pneumonia later on. I'll be telling you a few words about aspiration pneumonia later on when it comes. Okay, next please. You would want to know the common drugs which are available in the market. H2 blockers are over-the-counter drugs, and many times you don't need the prescription of a doctor, and therefore these drugs tend to be misused because of it's an over-the-counter drug, so people just use them, they buy them, and they eat them, which they should not do. So ranitidine medicines, they are available as 150 and 300 milligram tablets, and the common names that you can get in the market are Rantac, Zintac, Histac, Asiloc, Zantac, and so many others. So I told you this is an over-the-counter drug. That means you can just go and get it and eat it. Pediatric syrups are also available, and injectables of ranitidine are also available. These drugs have been preferred over cimetidine because these are potent. These have less anti-androgenic action. They are less permeable into the brain. They do not significantly affect hepatic metabolism. However, the side effects of ranitidine are irregular heartbeats, yellowing of the skin, eyes, dizziness, and headache. Recently, I want you to know that although we are using ranitidine extensively in India, the US FDA has banned ranitidine because it is producing a substance which is known as NDMA, that is non-nitro isomethylamine, and this compound actually causes severe kidney disorders and might lead to cancer of the kidneys. So the US FDA has banned ranitidine. Of course, we are extensively using. It is also important to know why FDA has banned and why I told you it has been banned, so that over-the-counter prescriptions cannot occur very easily. Next slide, please. Dosage, I told you, we are using in gastroesophageal reflux disease, in peptic ulcers, in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, as pediatric syrup, and so many other diseases which are causing acidity. And the doses depend on the disease which has been produced. In simpler diseases, we use it as 150 milligram twice daily, or otherwise a 300 milligram once a day. Next slide, please. Other very common and very widely used H2 blockers are famotidine, which is available as 20 and 40 milligram tablets, and the common names are Famocid, Topcid, Pepcid, and so many other names. This is much better than ranitidine because it has a longer duration of action. It is 5 to 8 times more potent than ranitidine. It has very less anti-androgenic effect, and it is more suitable for the Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Plus also, famotidine does not produce NDMA, which harms the kidneys and leads to kidney cancers. The other, which is the common H2 blocker which we use, are the roxetidine, which is again available as 75 and 150 milligram tablets. We use, the names are Rotain, Zoprex, Roxit, and so on. This is extremely potent, much more potent than famotidine is, and there is absolutely no anti-androgenic effect. That means prolactin is not secreted, prolactin levels do not increase, and therefore all the other effects due to prolactin are reduced. Next, please. Okay, so that was, I think, about H2 blockers. If you have any questions, we can take them up later on. The other group of drugs which are there in the topic today are the proton pump inhibitors. So as the name suggests, they inhibit the proton pump. Now, what is a proton pump? If you don't know what is a proton pump, you will not know what it is inhibiting. So in the cells of the gastric mucosa, there is an enzyme which is known as hydrogen potassium ATPase enzyme. This is the proton pump, and this HK ATPase enzyme, it is actually responsible for production of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. So the proton pump inhibitors are the drugs which are suppressing the gastric acid secretion by reacting covalently with hydrogen potassium ATPase enzyme. And thereby it is reducing, it binds with the proton pump irreversibly and therefore thereby reducing the gastric side effects. Next slide, please. It is very important to know. We now just to recapitulate a little bit before we go any further, because that's what I always keep doing, recapitulate what we have learned so that we do not forget and don't get confused. Antacids are neutralizing the acids, the H2 blockers and the PPIs, they are reducing the acid secretion. So there is so much of difference between all the three drugs. What we need to remember about the proton pump inhibitors is that their action is reduced by food. So they should be taken on an empty stomach, followed at least 1 hour by meal. No food should be taken between the PPI and the at least 1 hour before, after the PPI. You can take the food up 1 hour after the PPI. That's what I meant. So the very common PPIs available in the market nowadays are omeprazole, esomeprazole, lansoprazole, pantoprazole, rabiprazole, and so on. So there are also so many others, but these are the commonest which are used, and these are over-the-counter drugs, and therefore, unfortunately, these are also misused many times. We will come to that later on. So next slide. So the uses of PPIs. Again, it's almost as the same as the H2 blockers, because both of them are reducing the acid secretion. So we have peptic ulcer, bleeding peptic ulcer. Bleeding peptic ulcer, when the ulcer is so bad that it starts bleeding. It has already gone into the vascular area, and so it is bleeding. Again, the GERD, that is gastroesophageal reflux disease, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. I already told you about Zollinger-Ellison syndrome and the gastrin secretion. The stress ulcers, I talked to you about stress ulcers, anything that causes stress to the body, depression, anxiety, any disease which is causing stress. Also, even diseases like the COPD, that is, it's a lung disease where there is breathlessness and all. In COPD, the lung is increasing, and so the esophagus gets compressed. So the acid goes from the stomach into the esophagus, thereby causing GERD and ulcers. So these are the PPIs can be used for these stress ulcers. And finally, they can be used for preventing the symptoms due to aspiration pneumonia. Now, what is aspiration pneumonia? Pneumonia, you all know, it is a lung disease which is caused, it's a serious lung disease which is caused because of bacteria and viruses. Aspiration pneumonia is when you are when the food instead of going into the esophagus, it is going into the pharynx, and from there into the trachea, and then it lodges into the lungs, thereby causing chemical pneumonitis and sometimes pneumonia. And also, if it is not treated, it leads to lung abscess. So it is very important to know aspiration pneumonia, prevent aspiration pneumonia. And aspiration pneumonias are caused because the patient cannot swallow because of some the pharyngeal nerve is defective, or the pharyngeal nerve is damaged, or there can be Parkinson's syndrome or stroke, or even COPD, like I told you, where there is swelling of the lungs, and so therefore the esophagus is reduced. All these can lead to excess acid secretion, not excess acid secretion, but the acids, they can go into the lungs. So that is why we have to co-prescribe always PPIs and H2 blockers for prevention of symptoms due to aspiration pneumonia. Next slide, please. The adverse side effects of PPIs. This is more or less common with every drug. So you can have nausea, and you can have diarrhea and abdominal pain. muscle joint pains, dizziness. You can have rashes, leukopenia, hepatic dysfunctions, and sometimes there are also in the medical records some reports of gynecomastia and erectile dysfunction, but these are extremely rare, and they come on very prolonged use. Next, please. Individual PPIs. The first drug would be omeprazole. And,
Somehow, maybe due to
it
network
is
issue,
the name, common name.
Yes, you can continue.
Okay. So the common, there are so many omeprazole brands, but the very common ones that you can get to see are Omes and Ocid, and which are available as 20 milligram or 40 milligram tablets. Oral absorption is about 50%, and as the gastric pH rises, higher fractions may be absorbed, and the half-life of this omeprazole is half to 1 hour. It's an extremely well tolerated, very good, safe drug. Next, please. We have esomeprazole. This is another, it is a variant of the omeprazole. It is extremely, extremely effective. And like omeprazole, we have it at 20 and 40 milligram tablet, the commonest names being Esos and Nexium. It has high oral bioavailability. It has a longer half-life, and it is better for GERD symptoms, and therefore esomeprazole is sometimes, we tend to prescribe esomeprazole when we need a better action for GERD symptoms. Next, please. We have lansoprazole. As the common names available are Lanzol, Lan, Livan, and Lansoprazole, so many of them. And they are available as 15 and 30 milligrams tablets. These are extremely potent, high bioavailability, and it has a longer and faster onset of action than omeprazole. A word about lansoprazole. Lansoprazole is an extremely safe drug, and even in pediatric group, lansoprazole is widely prescribed. Next slide, please. Pantoprazole, extremely well tolerated drug, again as 20 and 40 milligram tablets. The common names that we get to see are Pantocid, Pancid, Pentagon, Pantec, and so many others. They are more acid stable. These are available for IV administration, and also they are particularly employed in peptic ulcer bleeding and prophylaxis of acute stress ulcers. Because they can be intravenously administered, they have a real advantage over the other PPIs. Next, please. Rabiprazole, another extremely well tolerated and a very good drug because it is extremely available in the stomach. The half-life is more, and it helps in gastric mucin secretion, as a result of which it is very effective in peptic ulcers, because mucin is secreted, and it increases the gastric acid barrier. Okay, so the slides have gone somehow. There is
The
a problem.
slides have gone. Okay, so I'm again trying to just add. You can continue a discussion. We are again trying to just bring back the slide.
Okay, so that was about rabiprazole. Again, rabiprazole is available in the injectable form also. So pantoprazole and rabiprazole, these have one more advantage over the other other PPIs, because
excuse me, sorry, who
yes.
is Shubho Roy? He has started presenting, so my presentation went off. So Mr. Shubha, or maybe some Shubha Roy, you have to stop your presentation. Yes. So now we are again going back to the presentation.
Yes, please. Okay, So we talked about rabeprazole. So we also told how it increases the gastric acid barrier by producing mucin. So therefore, it is extremely helpful in peptic ulcers. It has also the fastest acid suppression among all the other PPIs that are available. Next, please. So just to summarize the topic, H2 blockers and PPIs are more potent than antacids in relieving the symptoms of heartburn and peptic ulcers. And like I told you while recapitulating, antacids are neutralizing the acidity. They are doing nothing else. They are providing just a symptomatic relief of acidity. Whereas H2 blockers and the PPIs, because they are preventing the secretion of the antacid from the cells of the gastric mucosa, so that is why they are more effectively treating the disease per se that is present there, that is there in the gastric mucosa. And H2 blockers and PPIs are more potent than the antacids in relieving the symptoms of heartburn and peptic ulcers. However, antacids provide quick relief from the symptoms of heartburn and fullness of stomach. That is because they are neutralizing the acids. So the action is more prompt. Within 1 to 3 minutes, there is action. Also because these antacids are combined with antiflatulents and anesthetics, so therefore their action of heartburn and fullness of stomach is very quickly resolved. H2 blockers and PPIs both block and reduce acid production in the stomach, but PPIs are stronger and faster in reducing stomach acids. H2 blockers specifically reduce acid release in the evening, and therefore they are more effective in treating ulcers, particularly because we can give a combination of PPIs and H2 blockers, because H2 blockers prevent nocturnal acidity. So that is why H2 blockers are specifically reduce acid release in the evening. Okay, so next slide, please. So that was all about the antacids and the H2 blockers and the PPIs. But I thought that it should be important that we should also know certain foods, since we already know what are the causes of increased acidity in the stomach. So we also need to know that foods that neutralize in the stomach acids in the stomach, and these are bananas. Banana is a very low acid food. It contains pectin, which is binding with the food, and so that the food does not stick with the gastric mucosa. So therefore, since it does not stick, so therefore acid secretion is reduced. Also, bananas form a coating in the stomach, and therefore it causes a kind of gastric acid barrier. Melons are highly alkaline foods, and they also cause a coating in the stomach, and therefore they cause a gastric acid what you call barrier. Oatmeals, these are highly fibrous. They absorb water, they increase in bulk, and therefore they reduce fullness of the stomach, and also they reduce constipation. So once constipation is reduced, acidity is also reduced, and fullness of the stomach is also reduced. Yogurts, they act in a similar way. They also contain probiotics, which help in developing your immunity, and also developing the beneficial gut flora that helps in your digestion and reduces fullness of the stomach. Green vegetables, they are again fibrous, so they also can reduce fullness of the stomach. There are so many other foods which we can discuss later on if we want to. There is also one thing I would like to say: gastric acid GERD, gastric acid reflux, hyperacidity can be reduced by lifestyle changes. It is very important. See, you cannot go on buying medicines, eating medicines, because each and every medicine, most of these medicines also, although they are extremely well tolerated, they also have a lot of side effects, particularly on prolonged use. So anybody with a GERD or acid reflux or hyperacidity must change their lifestyle. What lifestyle changes? No smoking, no alcohol, or extremely reduced alcohol. Actually, you should not take alcohol. No smoking, no alcohol, no fried food. Use small quantity of food. repeated times, reduce the quantity of food that you're using at night, and so on and so forth. Next, please. Okay, so that brings to the end of my topic. Thank you. We can discuss now what you have learned. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them. And
Yes.
yes.
Ma'am,
So thank you so much for the enriching topic. Someone have to mute. Shiva, if you can mute for some time, yes. So otherwise, if two or three people will just unmute, then there will be an echo. So it is really an enriching session, and basic things has been covered by ma'am. So, and ma'am has also tell about the lifestyle changes, which is very important. We think that over the counter unnecessarily we should not take this PPI antacid or H2 blocker without consultation. First, we will focus on the lifestyle changes so that we can easily manage these acid reflux, gastric problems, and so on. But if medicine is required, you said. So my first question is, ma'am, maybe I have missed that point, that ranitidine, you are saying that Rantac or ranitidine. So these are banned in the Western countries. So why is it so?
That is because they produce a substance which is known as NDMA, that is N-nitro methylamine, dimethylamine, and this is known to cause kidney damage, and also this is known to cause
yes, one of our
carcinogenic.
dietitian has already asked that ranitidine should not be taken by the CKD or kidney patients.
Yes,
is
correct.
So?
It should not be used. It should not be used by a CKD or a kidney patient. Yes,
Kidney
that
patient.
is the only, that is the use, because it produces NDMA. NDMA is carcinogenic. It also reduces the function of the, it reduces the function of the kidneys. A CKD patient is already kidney compromised. So
Yes.
that is absolutely not to be used in.
Not to be used, but the patients are randomly used at their homes, and Rantac is a very famous medicine. We actually
unfortunately there are so many drugs. I need not go into them. There are so many NSAIDs, that is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and these kind of drugs, they are banned in US. You
the
see,
same question someone is asking: Is it can it be given to the heart patient or the CVD patient? Is it safe for the heart failure patient?
What
Ranitidine.
Ranitidine can be used in a heart patient. In India, we are using ranitidine, and we are also giving injectable ranitidines when necessary. It can be given. But nowadays, with the advent of so many other newer drugs, we try to avoid ranitidine and give famotidine or
famotidine, yes.
Yes, famotidine.
But famotidine is in the strength of 40, 80, right?
20 and 40.
20 and 40. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are many senior faculties has already joined in the session, and I will request any of our senior dietitians, if you want to share anything, like from Park Nursing Home, we have Shishu Mongol, chief dietitian. We have dietitian from Apollo Hospital. We have dietitian from Kothari Hospital. So if you have senior madams are there, so if you have any questions to ma'am, so you can ask their questions. Otherwise, we will move.
Ma'am, I would like to ask you one question.
She is Sushmita Chattopadhyay, senior dietitian. Yes.
Ma'am, how do you prefer for a patient who is having GERD problem or flatulence or something like this? If he or she is complaining about this, how do you prefer food intolerance taste for them?
I didn't get your question. These patients are having. I didn't get your question. How do I prefer food intolerance?
What type of food you are asking, ma'am? Can you please repeat your question? Even if you can clear,
if the patient is having,
hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
If a patient is complaining about the GERD and all these symptoms, can he prefer to have food intolerance test?
Yes, why not?
Test is required, though it is a
yes, of course.
It's
It's an expensive thing. We normally do not advise, but of course the the gastrointestinal medicine specialists advise food intolerance test when, particularly when the medicines are not working. First, we do it try with medicines. So if they are not working, then we go down to this. It's an expensive proposition, but yes, it can be done. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Ma'am, good evening. Thank you for the session. It was lovely. I was asking because in one of the articles I read that the antacid use also destroys the gut flora. The antacids who are using chronically to suppress
Yes.
their acidity, they
Correct.
disturb the gut flora a lot. Is that correct?
Yes, antacids actually, when anybody talks in a layman term, they
Again,
are
you have to mute Shiva. You have to mute, otherwise it is equal.
okay. So antacids in a broad way, people for even for H2 blockers, they will use the name as antacids or such. So what happens is mostly in the H2 blockers, if they are used for a very long time, so they can give rise to, they can destroy the gut flora, and therefore they can also theoretically there is also cell hyperplasia on very long term use. So that is why we do not prefer prolonged use of H2 blockers, because theoretically if there is cell hyperplasia, there can be, I'm not saying there will be, there may be gastric malignancies. So that's why a prolonged use of this is avoided. Yes.
Ma'am, just one more question I have. The foods
Yes,
you
please.
recommended which are low in acid content to kind
Correct.
of heal. So most of the food, actually, whenever we deal a acidity or gastritis patient, they also have a very chronic flatulence or bloating problem too.
Correct. Correct.
So in that case, like green vegetables, almost like many of the green vegetables, also sometimes yogurt, because of
Yes.
the you never know the lactic acid content of the
Correct.
yogurt, or
Correct.
if the banana is high in on fructose. So
Yes.
any suggestion or recommendation on that? How can we optimize that through food? Because
Um,
since I'm
See, I'm not really a food expert, but in my practice, I do not. I just avoid giving too much of food lectures, because I have found in my experience that these food intake and acidity and flatulence is a very individual thing. So normally, I always tell my patients who has got hyperacidity or flatulence, I tell them to observe which food is causing that. You know, the food which gives me bloating effect may not give it to you. So I think that could be it. But I think since we do not have, our foods, they do not have any uh, these chemical things written on them. So it's very difficult to use. I'm sorry, I'll not be
Yes,
able to
yes,
tell you
yes,
too much
yes. I
about it.
agree with you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I just wanted
You
your
have to,
insight.
I think, figure out which food is causing the acidity, and then prevent that food.
Combination we
You
have
know.
to do.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Ma'am, I
So,
would like to
Thank you,
ask
ma'am.
you one more question.
sure.
That many of time the patients are advised to have husk at empty
Yes.
stomach, which will
Yes.
also been
Isabgol
found
has
very
got this
relevant
type of.
for the GRD patient, gut
Correct.
patients, and flatulence. Can you clarify about this? Sarium husk, I'm talking about.
You talk
That
of
is
husk powder, which is
Isabgol or is this type
isabgol
of.
and other. Yes. 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 See, normally in our practice, we don't advise it on a empty stomach. At bedtime, we advise that isabgol or a husk powder to be taken, so that it increases the bulk, and thereby it reduces the constipation, and it reduces this thing. I'm not very sure about taking husk powder empty stomach. Yeah,
Okay. Vida,
we
what?
usually advise
Yes.
it after food, at bedtime. Before
Ah,
bedtime, you take isabgol.
okay. Vida,
Ma'am,
what
can I
is
ask?
your question? Yes, one by one. Vida.
Sir, I am
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Manveera.
Yes. What is your
Sir, I
question?
have
We
a
will
question.
take few questions. Not all questions we will be willing to do. Yes, Vida,
Uh,
please ask your question. Somebody is.
Preetha has to mute
Yes, yes.
yourself. Yeah.
Vida, please.
yes, I have unmuted myself. Good evening, ma'am. You are explaining it very well.
and so interesting topic. My question is that all these antacids and H2 blockers can lead to reduce the stomach enzyme. So, in protein digestion, mainly protein digestion happens in stomach. So, this reduced enzyme can cause indigestion of
No,
protein.
no. They are not reducing the enzymes that are causing protein digestion. They are reducing gastrin. They are reducing histamine, and they are reducing the effects of HK ATPase enzymes. These are not actually breaking down protein. Protein breakdown is caused by other enzymes, not by these. So they are not. They don't affect protein digestion. Yes.
This is the HCl, ma'am. They reduces the hydrochloric acid, which
What thing? What thing? Sorry.
hydrochloric acid.
Yes. Yes.
So, peptide based enzyme are activated in hydrochloric acid, ma'am. So,
Yes.
question is this, that since hydrochloric acid is reduced, so peptide based acid cannot activated much properly. So, this
No.
can
No.
protein
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
digestion.
No. We have to understand one fundamental thing. When a drug is developed, like for example, let us take H2 blocker or a PPI. When a drug is developed, we develop a particular dose, you see. So that in that particular dose, in that particular time frame where it is prescribed, it will produce optimal acid production, which is there as in a normal condition. What we are talking as hyperacidity is an abnormal condition. More acids are produced. So because the more acids are produced, we need to neutralize, we need to prevent the cells from producing more acids, right? So they, in the dose which is prescribed, in the doses, so they are absolutely safe, and hydrochloric acid is not reduced. It is the hyperacidity which is reduced. Excessive production is reduced, not the optimal level of acid. Okay.
Very nice, very nice. Clear, Vida. Shupana, what is your question?
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, actually,
Hello,
sir, may I continue?
Yes, one by one. First, Shupana has a very small question, then Shinjini.
Actually, my question is related to Vidha.
Okay, you can ask.
Okay, so actually my question was the prolonged use of PPI or H2 blockers, does it affect the protein digestion? So that means prolonged use of H2 blocker or PPI doesn't affect in protein digestion, right?
First of all, we need to understand one basic fundamental thing. Why should you use a prolonged period? A doctor is not going to give you for time immemorial, not going to prescribe you for 1 year. Every medicine has its dose and it has its time frame. So in that time frame, nothing, your other enzymes, your action on other enzymes, your bodily functions, they are not reduced, they are not affected. So there should not be a prolonged use. There is nothing known as prolonged use. There is always a time frame, always a time during which it must be used. Nothing must be used more than that. If actually nothing must be used more than 10 to 15 days if you are using a over-the-counter prescription.
But
Anything
the people are doing, what the patients are doing, they are taking for year after year. Year after year, they are taking pantoprazole.
So that they should not do.
Yes,
That
exactly.
is what. Even till now, researches are going on, and if you are going to use it for a long time, something known as acid rebound might occur. Means what is reducing the acid will produce the acid. So acid rebound can occur. The gastric acid flora, they can, the bad flora, they can get proliferated, and like enterochromatin cell proliferation might happen, and that might lead to gastric cancers. So a very prolonged use is absolutely dangerous and never to be used. That is why there is a time frame. Over-the-counter medicines should never be used for more than 10 to 15 days, maximum to maximum 15 days. If the symptoms are not relieved in 15 days, a patient or a person must go to a gastroenterologist or a doctor who's qualified enough to prescribe the medicine after doing the tests and after figuring out what is wrong with that person. We should never do a prolonged use. So since there is no prolonged use, there is no effect on your protein digestion or whatever you're saying. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Suparna?
Yes, good evening, ma'am. It was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
But ma'am, I have a personal query about whatever you just explained right now.
Okay.
My father was taking esomeprazole tablets since last year with
Okay.
the prescription of a doctor.
Okay.
My father has got fatty liver in 2015, but it
Okay.
has resolved mostly.
Okay.
He has suffered from gastric ulcer, gastritis in 2014, and it was also resolved, but after that my father is suffering from acidity while stopping the antacid.
Okay.
Whenever he stop it, he suffers from acidity. So the doctor has said to take it for 3 months to 6 months, but it is
Yes.
continuously prolonging the time period. So ma'am, can it cause a prolonged vitamin B12 or any other deficiency that can lead to any kind of neural defects or any kind of epileptic problems?
No, I don't think that I have read a study where a very prolonged use of these antacids can lead to, deficiency of this, and it can lead to nerve defects. No, I don't think so. But the thing is that prolonged use must not be done. If he is having gas acidity, irrespective of for a very very long time, that needs to be investigated. Why he is having acidity? Maybe there are certain foods he is using which are causing acidity, or there must be the root cause must be found out. So very
I
prolonged use
guess
is never done. Yeah. Yes.
I guess he's mostly stressed because his stress
Yes.
management is not there. Because whenever I say something, he is not bothering at all.
Yeah.
So, so I
Well,
cannot
these are
teach him to do, and I cannot force him. In fact, so whenever a doctor is saying that you should not take stress, then he try to do something, and when he get rid of that, then again stop the habit, and again suffer, and again it's a cycle. So.
the problem with stress is it is a very complex matter. You do not know how.
Yes.
You just can't say don't take stress. We have to find out the root cause of the stress, why the stress has occurred. So if that cause is not removed, why the stress is there? The stress can be mental, and the stress can be, like I told you, so many diseases might cause stress. So we have to find out why the stress is there. We just can't say stress kam karo. अब stress क्यों लेते हो यार? That is not possible. So so you have to try and find out. In old age, there is a stress. There's a lot of insecurity. Children are not there with them, and they have to figure out how to do. They are no more active, so their brains are not working. So many things. Everything causes stress. So these stress can ultimately lead to hyperacidity. As a family, since I've done a lot of community medicine also, here is the role of the family. A family only can provide security and lack of stress. So you just can't say stress khatam karo. Stress can't be
Yes,
finished
ma'am.
in one day.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
And
you, ma'am.
also, that is also true that you cannot keep prolonging a medicine. How long you can give? You can't keep
Yes.
prolonging for years and years together. Right. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
So
Sir,
there are
One
few
more question
common
I have.
questions are there. Mandira, just 1 minute. There are few common questions during pregnancy. In the
yes.
first trimester, there is morning sickness, and sometimes doctor do not advise to take any medications at that time. So they also ask to take the this lifestyle changes, and these are advice. So what do you suggest for the gestational patients, that what antacids or PPIs or what they should take to subside their
Okay.
acidity?
For in pregnancies, normally we will always say that in the first trimester, no medicine is to be taken, and even antacids are to be avoided. Every kind of antacid are to be avoided. But then there is also, you have to measure the pros and the cons. It is not being done, and so naturally they are vomiting a lot. There is so much of fullness. So most of the times we see that with these lifestyle changes and with the food that we consume, or even with things like isabgol ki bhusi le lo, and all those husk powders are available. You take
Because
those
constipation is very common.
Ayurvedic things. With that, a lot of things are sorted out in the first trimester. If at all you have to give an antacid, one should never give a sodium bicarb was extremely used at one time, and many people even in the villages are using sodium bicarb. That is one antacid which should never give into pregnancy, because that can cause sodium overload. It also causes fluid retention, so it should not be given. And I told you when I was we were studying the antacids, I told you the trisilicate salts of magnesium, Digene gel, and
Legend,
I
yes.
think there is Gelusil gel. So
Mucan
these
gel.
contain the Mucan gel does not contain a trisilicate salt,
Yes,
but
yes.
Digene gel, Gelusil salt, they contain a trisilicate salt of aluminium and magnesium particularly. So this is detrimental to the fetus in the first trimester of pregnancy. So we would like to avoid these things. You can give any other antacid if required, if at all required in the first trimester of pregnancy. Mostly in the first trimester of pregnancy, one does not require. So if you require, you can use something else which does not have a bicarbonate or of sodium, bicarbonate of sodium, and trisilicate salt. You can give any other. Calcium carbonate, that is extremely safe. It comes in the name of Tums. It's very nice. You have nice chewy tablets, very juicy, very nice, very tasty. So in pregnancy, people have bad taste. So that is also taken care of. So you can give a calcium carbonate.
Calcium
I
carbonate.
remember just now. Yes, calcium carbonate salt.
Two, three questions we'll take, then we will end the session. Mandira?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Dada,
Good
I have.
evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Yes, Mandira.
Good evening, ma'am. I want to ask only, doctors prescribe Rantac, Zintac, this kind of medicines
H2
before
blocker.
meal.
Yes.
Before meal. But I
Okay.
have seen, whereas I have seen Asiloc RD, they are prescribing after meal. My question is why?
I do not want to comment on what the doctors are prescribing. Each doctor is very good and they must be having their own reasons. But scientifically, H2 blockers, ranitidine, famotidine, or any other tidine tablets, they do not have any relation with the food. They are very resistant to food.
Only the PPIs have,
So,
as you described.
only the PPIs and also antacids. You should not take an antacid immediately. You should not take an antacid before a meal, or you should not take an antacid like Digene gel and all those gel antacids. The antacids, not the blockers. You should not take it immediately after food. You can take at least half an hour to 1 hour after the food, but not immediately. PPIs are never taken after food or with food. But H2 blockers, they are very safe. They can be taken with food. So if a doctor prefers to give before meals or after meals, it is not, it is immaterial. So that is his preference. What he is doing, he is doing.
Okay.
But scientifically, you can take an H2 blocker anytime. Yeah, before food, after food, anytime.
Thank you,
Yes.
ma'am.
Only
Thank you.
PPS should not be taken. Yes.
PPIs not be taken.
No.
Like
no.
ranitidine, pantoprazole, omeprazole, this should be taken in the empty stomach.
Empty
And
stomach,
same
and 1 hour, at least 1 hour gap must be given between the food and the intake of.
If anybody is taking thyroid medicine, hypothyroid medicine, so
Yes.
they should give any gap with that medicine, or they can take together in the
No,
early morning?
the thyroxine has no relation with the PPIs, and a patient can take together. No problem.
Yes, Shuchandra?
Good evening, Dada, and good evening, ma'am. This is a nice and enriching session, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question that does H2 blocker or PPIs can affect any in calcium absorption?
Calcium absorption.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
not at all. Not at all. It does not affect calcium absorption. No.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
So, Rajarshi, what is your question? Rajarshi Menon.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Then Pritha, then Priya. Then
Good evening, ma'am. It
I
was a
want to
nice
ask-
session. Thank you, ma'am. I'm Rajshri. I'm from Bangalore. So my question is, if someone is taking Randac and is still experience any gastric discomfort, is it safe to take any antacid? That is H2 blocker and antacid together. Is it?
Yes, see, it depends on the doctor. Like I told you, these H2 blockers, they are more effective at night, because they are inhibiting the histamine action. So histamine usually are secreted in the evening and the night. So for ulcers and for hyperacidity, which is caused at night, H2 blockers are extremely safe. So they can be taken. So you can take a combination of an H2 blocker and a PPI. You can also take a combination of a PPI or an H2 blocker and an antacid, but the gap between the antacid and the PPI or the H2 blocker must be at least 1 to 1.5 hours, 2 hours. Yes.
Okay.
Not concurrently. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Acha,
Thank you.
before
Ma'am, I
going-
have a question.
1 minute. Just Shinchita have a very relevant question I find in the chat box. Shinchita, what is your question? It is related to prolactin and she is suffering from PCOS. Yes, please ask your question.
Uh, uh, Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. It is very excellent season. Like, I want to ask a question. I have some prolactin issue. Like, I have got one year back. Like, when I tested, like, it is 41.65. Then my doctor prescribed me some carbapenem, and he told me to avoid any antacid, any PPI, any H2 blocker, any gastric.
Yes.
Again, I got recently I got when I am suffering from some fever, and then I went to the doctor, and he said me some antacid along with some fever medicine, and then I got again the prolactin, high prolactin secreted from breast, and then I told to my doctor. He said me that why you uh, take this antacid or gastric tablet. I told you many times. What is the connection between the antacid and prolactin?
Yes. Antacids are drugs which are neutralizing the acid in your stomach. So things like Digene and Gelusil, they do not have much action on prolactin. However, H2 blockers, they tend to increase the levels of prolactin. So that is why H2 blockers like ranitidine and famotidine and all these drugs, they should not be taken um, if you already have a prolactin issue. PPIs, they are much more well tolerated. However, if the prolactin levels are going haywire even with PPIs, so that should also be avoided. But the PPIs are safer than H2 blockers so far as prolactin secretion is concerned. But antacids, I don't think I have not come across any study or any case where antacids like Digene and Gelusil and all these, the antacids which are neutralizing the acid in the stomach, they are causing prolactin increase. No, I have not come across such a thing. H2 blockers, yes, they increase prolactin levels.
Ma'am, we will take only 2 questions, and there are many questions already in the chat box. So I am requesting all the participants that I will put this video in YouTube, and in the Facebook page already the link has been given. You can put this question in the YouTube comment so that ma'am in her leisure time within 1 week or within 1 month, whenever ma'am will check that video,
I'll get
she
back to
can.
you as soon as possible. Yes.
Yes, but not today. It is not possible to answer all questions, and there are few questions which I can also answer you. So Annesha and Priya, Priya, you can ask your question.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening. Ma'am, what is the difference between PAN 40 and PAN D? Nowadays, all doctors are advised to take PAN D along with antibiotics or paracetamol, so or rabeprazole D. So, what is the difference PAN 40 or
This is the another molecule. Ma'am can elaborate it when you have that nausea.
Okay.
Yes.
But first, to tell you, pantoprazole is a single drug, and as you know, PAN D is a combination drug which contains domperidone, Domstal. So that is usually taken for Domstal. The work of Domstal is to reduce the peristaltic movements of the alimentary canal. So what happens is normally the peristaltic movements are such that the food will go down, but sometimes issues happen. So when the antiperistaltic movements occur, and therefore the food or the acids, they come into your throat, and you tend to feel nauseous and vomiting. So for that reason, a D molecule is added, and that is why doctor will prescribe, if you with acidity you have nausea and vomiting, in that case a D is added. Otherwise, there is no need to unnecessarily overload with more medications. Yes. And what was the second part of your question? I forgot. Pantoprazole and Pan D.
Okay,
You said.
I got my
Prescribed along with
You
that
got your answer.
steroids or antibiotics. What is the
Okay,
relation with
and also I want to make one thing clear. Somewhere I was reading some, when you in that question box, somebody had asked me whether to use antacids or these PPIs and H2 blockers with paracetamol. I don't think that is needed. You don't need to use a paracetamol with paracetamol. If they are only PPIs, that is omeprazole and lansoprazole and rabiprazole, only these drugs are prescribed for those analgesics, non-steroidal and anti-inflammatory agents. Even
But when
H2
they are
blockers
taking
do not help.
paracetamol, is it required to take any type of like
No,
PPI?
it is not. It is not
required.
required.
We
No,
generally not take. Yes, that's
not
why.
required. No, not required. We should always remember that whenever we take these drugs which are reducing fever or pain, you should not take it on an empty stomach. So if you have eaten something and paracetamol, no. In with paracetamol, we do not advise antacids or
So
anything.
this is the common question for Trisha Modak. Also, hope you got your answer. And now, Annesha, what is your question?
Yes, ma'am. Why PPIs work best in say Zollinger-Ellison syndrome and not H2 blockers?
Well, again, we have to understand the basic working of the H2 blockers. H2 blockers mostly work at night because they are blocking histamine. But in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, what happens is these are these neurotumors which are there in the alimentary canal, and these neurotumors, they are continuously producing gastrin. It is not that gastrin is produced only at night or in the morning. So that is why you need a PPI for Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. It is more effective. PPIs are more effective because PPIs can work around the clock. The H2 blockers are more effective at night. So that is why PPIs are a better drug for Zollinger-Ellison syndrome than the H2 blockers.
Thank you, ma'am. Can both be used?
Yes, both can be used. I told you both can be used. When the acidity is more, or when the chances of peptic ulceration, or when there is a bleeding peptic ulcer, then we have to use both. We can use the PPI in the morning, and in the evenings we give a H2 blocker to reduce histamine. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Navonita, you have also asked domperidine. So Navonita, hope you got your answer. Is it necessary to take Pan-D, domperidine with
Domperidone you don't need to take. Domperidone you don't need to take all the time. It's only if you have that antiperistaltic movement which is causing nausea and vomiting. Unnecessarily, I do not prefer to, overload with drugs. Take as less drugs as possible. So if that is not required, don't take. That is it. Yes.
So most of the things I think you have answered, because I was just going through the chat box and there is many repetition of question because the common things comes in the mind. So thanks a lot. I cannot express my gratitude. It is a really a nice session. And in the nutrition fraternity from last 13-14 years I am working, so we are not been discussing this topic. We have discussed many nutrition related topics. We have discussed on diabetes, gestational diabetes, pediatrics, but this is a very relevant topic we have never discussed. So once again, thank you for this nice session, and hope the students is really nice. So hope the students you have liked the session and have they enjoyed the session, because ma'am, you can understand the questions coming in the chat box and the interactions. That means they have enjoyed the session and you have discussed it very simply. Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very informative session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Or do I
Thank you, ma'am.
exist?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
Have a
you.
good night, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am. Take care.
Thank you, Sominder, for excellent
Thank you,
session.
ma'am. It was a beautiful session. Thank you, ma'am.
Many senior dietitians have expressed their thanks in the chat box. They have said that it is a very excellent session. Many senior dietitians were there in today's session.
Okay,
So
thank you.
thanks for your time. Everybody has joined. Take your time, and everybody was long waiting for this session. So we will come with some another session in very near future with Dr. Rita Bhattacharya, and you please suggest what should be the topic. So we will discuss on that. I have also many questions on the hypertensive drugs, hypertension and kidney related problems. And there are many drugs, and they have to counsel that cardiovascular patient, diabetic patient as well. So diabetic drug we are teaching them, but hypertensive drug or the dyslipidemic drug we are not teaching. So these are the drugs which
Just
are very
one word, thing I want to just say, because when I was just going through the chat thing before I started, there was one interesting question. What is the difference between heartburn and a chest heart attack?
Yes. Oh, sorry,
That
I
was
missed this
extremely
question.
important. I wanted to answer and somehow I
Yes,
missed it
ma'am.
because
I
with the
heard.
question.
I
She
questioned it actually.
has put, yes.
So that is
Yes.
extremely very relevant and an important question, I think, because heartburn is so important and it very, very, to a great extent, it mimics a heart attack. So, and many times we mistake. Whenever there is a chest pain, we say it's a heart attack, but it may not be a heart attack. It's a heartburn. So heartburn symptoms will be, it is because of hyperacidity. So the acid is going, and so you have a kind of a burning pain. And usually it is because when you are in a lying down position, heartburn increases because then the stomach and the esophagus becomes in one plane. So in heartburn, if one is sitting, so there is slightly lesser heartburn. But there is so much pain that because it can again be on the left side of the heart, and when the pain is there, you really can't figure out whether it is in the left side or the right side. But there are one or two points which you can distinguish between a heart attack pain, and I think we all should know whether it is a heart attack or not. Heart attack pain is extremely severely constricting pain. It is like as if your chest wall is kind of being pressed by compressed by a machine or something. It's very severe. There is extreme breathlessness. Of course, in heartburn also you can have a little bit of breathlessness because when there is pain, you tend to hyperventilate. So, but in a heart attack, there is definite sign of breathlessness. If you see the respiratory rate is extremely, reduced, and there is a lot of constricting pain, and there will be sweating, which is not there in heart. So a few of the signs to distinguish. Otherwise, many doctors also sometimes, even if I get a patient with a chest pain, I might tend to miss. But there are these things which we should not miss. It is a constricting type of pain. It is very severe. Most of the time, it might radiate to the left arm.
Yes.
And it's a radiational pain. It can radiate to the left arm, and sometimes it also radiates at the back towards the left scapula. Then there is also breathlessness, there is sweating. So these are some of the simple things. And there are, of course, many other things also, but that will be again another session to talk about heart attack.
Yes,
but
yes.
these are
If we
one
can
or two
arrange
few
only
things.
the Q&A session, then it will be very enriching. Only the
Yes,
Q&A session.
yeah, absolutely.
Kalpana di কেমন লাগলো?
Thank you for your answer. This was my question.
Excellent session.
Thank you, ma'am.
I like very much. Thank you, madam and Somendu.
Kalpana ma'am is working in Park Nursing Home, madam, and she is also 28 years experience, very senior person in Kolkata.
Very nice. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Kalpana.
Yes, really it's excellent. Actually, students are asking so many questions and very good questions were also there. Really, it's very much fruitful. And I'm waiting for the next session of you.
Oh, thank you so much, madam. I'll also love to meet you again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana di join করার জন্য.
Thank you.
Okay, then good night to all and bye-bye. Okay.
Okay.
Good night,
Bye.
sir.
Good
Good
night,
night,
ma'am.
Good night, sir. Good night. Take care.
Good night, ma'am. Good night, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good night. Thank you, sir.
I'm ending the session here. Okay.
Yes, please.
We
Even
can
I'll
leave.
exit. I don't know how to exit.